Hello and welcome back to the Shore Sports Network podcast, episode 2, here in late August. And guess what? It's football season. Shore Conference football is coming up in just a couple days. Hard to believe. We were just talking about this a few minutes ago. And it is always hard to believe the season's come up quick. But August 25th is opening day for Shore Conference football. And we got a lot of teams playing. So we're excited to talk about that and be back with another episode of the Shore Sports Network podcast. It's exciting to be doing this. We wanted to do a podcast for a while. So, here we are and excited to get things going. Want to thank our sponsors, Varsity Link, Jersey Mike Subs, always a great supporter of Shore Conference Athletics, Thrive, and the Iron House Performance Center. Bob Batter's here today, joined by Scott Stump, John Carelli, and Scott Martin of the Shore Sport Network. So, guys, thanks for joining me today, and excited to talk about some football. Stumpy, good to be back, getting the band back together.
Yeah,
So
I know. This has been a
about
long time in the works. I can't believe that we finally got a chance to do this. I feel like the last time was in about 2007, like in some car dealership side room. So yeah, it's good to be back and upgraded and excited. And yeah, one thing that's definitely changed, man. Week 0 is a whole different animal now. It started off with just a handful of games. Now it's become a pretty big deal, like the real start of the season now.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And just to go back, Scott and I, Stumpy and I, we'll be on every week talking Shore Conference football. So just get ready to hear us kind of recapping the previous week, talking about what's to come, and just touching on Shore Conference football storylines all week. John Carelli with us as well. You're seeing a lot of John, kind of our utility guy, bouncing around football, volleyball, doing a little bit of everything. And then Scott Martin, our new CEO, joining us today to talk some football. Stump, as you mentioned, week 0, you don't even really need to call it week 0 anymore because it's week 1 with the amount of teams that open their season. Week 0 is not anything new. It's been around for a handful of years, but we've had a couple. First, it was 1 or 2 teams, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 27 Shore Conference teams playing on Friday, or playing this weekend. 20 games in total, 17 on Friday, 2 more on Saturday, and then 1 more on Sunday down at the Battle of Beach in Ocean City. We'll touch on as many games as we can there. A lot of really standout ones. The one that I want to start with is a matchup of what's going to be 2 top 5 teams in the Shore. You don't know where those rankings are. You'll see those in a couple of days in our preseason Shore 16. But a huge game, and that's Rumson Fairhaven traveling to the Swamp to take on Middletown South. These are 2 of the Shore Conference flagship programs. Middletown South, an illustrious history, and Rumson, even though it's relatively recent, one of the best programs in the Shore during that time span. They've had some great games over the past handful of years, usually coming down to the wire. They kind of play similar styles. And I think starting off with a game like this, be pretty good for both teams, kind of get a gauge of where they are early on. Stump, these are programs really well, especially Middletown South, from their heyday. I think this is going to be a slugfest, just one of those games that it might be ugly, but it's going to be close and competitive, and it's probably going to come down to the wire.
One thing I noticed about this week 0 schedule, teams are not easing into the season. There's some huge games right out of the gate. I mean, this is a crucial game for the American division race. Right off the bat, it's probably eliminating someone from winning the championship in that division, which is crazy this early. And then, state playoff seedings, power rankings, Shore Conference rankings. And the thing I love about this game is you got a ton of big names in it. You look at the all-Shore guys coming back from last year. Colin Gallagher is the reigning defensive player of the year for Shore Sports Network. He's going to be lining up at edge. He'll be lining up at linebacker. He'll be lining up at running back. I mean, he's a star for them. Jake's Wakil back as their quarterback. And in the secondary, kicking, punting, selling the concessions, driving the bus to the away games. So, and then you have on the other side, Owen O'Toole. I was at that game last year where they came back against Raritan and stunned them out of a deep hole in the South Jersey Group 2 final. And O'Toole was unbelievable, especially as a sophomore, to be that poised. He's back after leading the Shore in passing yards. Alistair Orr's back after being their leading rusher. Nick Rigby, one of the top receivers in the Shore. And the battle in this game, like Bob said, is a lot of times is up front. And Rumson's going to have 2 300-pound guys up front. Middletown South always has some of the best linemen in the Shore. So I think it's just a great game. And it also shows the respect for Rumson's program that they're a Group 2 school in this division of heavyweights of much bigger schools and powerhouse non-public schools. And, they're right in the middle of it there. And, the fact that Rumson is right there with them. And last year they had a good battle. Rumson, I think this is a big thing for Rumson because they finished 4th in the American division last year. Even though that's how good that division is, that team made it all the way to the Group 2 finals and they were in 4th place in this division. So I think beyond just another state playoff run for Rumson, it's about making some noise in this division and showing as a Group 2 school that they can keep up with the bigger programs.
Yeah, real quick too. I was down at the scrimmage. It was Central and Rumson. Got to talk to Owen O'Toole a little bit, and you can just see the confidence in Owen O'Toole coming into the season. I know he had a great year last year, but he looks poised and ready for this season. I'm excited to see what he's going to do at the quarterback position and really competing for one of those top spots and really putting a name for himself out there. It's going to be exciting to watch him.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree as well. I mean, I think one of the key matchups to look at with Middletown South's defense is going to be how they contain O'Toole. And also with O'Toole's arm, I mean, he threw over 2,100 passing yards last year. He's got, like you said, the leading receiver, Nick Rigby, right by his side. So I think that's going to be a really key element in this matchup coming up. But I'm really curious to see how the defense of Rumson contains Siswakil with his wheels. They're very... They can run the ball right down your throat, and they also have that same type of defense as Rumson does as well, where they're going to be fighting on the field for all 4 quarters. And they both have same styles of play, and they're 2 of the more dynamic public powerhouses in the state. I think it's just a perfect week 0 matchup for the short conference throughout.
2 things I'm looking for in that game. The first is, last season, Rumson uncharacteristically could not run the ball, not nearly up to their own standards. I believe it's the first time in over a decade they didn't have a 1,000-yard running back. And Stump, they would just churn out 1,000-yard backs at will. And not just that, multiple 2,000-yard backs within that. Peter Lucas, Charlie Volker, so many guys, these behemoth offensive lines that you just couldn't stop. They couldn't do that last year. That's not going to stay the same. They have one of the best offensive line coaches in all of New Jersey in Joe Murphy. That's going to turn around. So if they get that back to its usual, area of success with the passing game they have, you can't call Rumson a sleeper. They were in the Group 2 final last year, but that could really tie everything together. Plus a defense that's usually really good. That's something I want to see early. And also, Rumson has a sophomore named Jack Harris. He looks the part as 6'3", around 300 pounds. Moves like a player, much smaller. Him on the defensive line against some of those Middletown South offensive linemen, that's a matchup to watch. Because I remember Colin Gallagher's sophomore year, he had 4 sacks in his high school debut. And I was like, whoa, this kid's going to be pretty good. And clearly he has been. I want to see if I could see the same thing out of Harris. Not necessarily 4 sacks, but that kind of impact right away from a highly touted sophomore.
Usually you see our guys going the other way. Middletown South in particular lost Luke Wayful, who was a budding all-shore linebacker for them, transferred to Hun. But, Rumson got one coming back the other way.
Yeah. And Luke Wayful's brother, Owen, has been at the Hun Community University in Michigan. So, yeah, there's a lot of – you hate to have to touch on the transfers in the offseason, but that's become the norm. That's the marquee Shore Conference versus Shore Conference game for this week. But there's a ton of really marquee non-conference games. And probably the biggest one, at least of the public schools in the state for sure, will be on Friday down at Ocean City High School's Cary Field. A great atmosphere for the Battle of the Beach showcase. I mean, how often can you play a football game where the Ferris wheel's in the background and you can reach the boardwalk if you have a good enough arm? So that's where Tom's River North will be for, I believe, the 3rd year in a row down in Ocean City. And they're going to be taking on Millville. Tom's River North, undefeated Group 5 state champion last year. Millville, Group 4 state champion last year. FBS recruits all over the field, 2 absolute powerhouses. And again, for a week 0 game, I mean, that is really one you can sink your teeth into.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking that the number 1 team in the public school ranks for the whole season, obviously there's a way long to go, could get decided in week 0. The reigning Group 5 champs against the reigning Group. I'm just happy. I'm excited that those coaches took that game. You know what I mean? A lot of coaches would have been like, I'm not starting the season by playing another group champion. That's a lot right out of the gate in week 0. But that just really helps promote football in New Jersey. So I love that, Coach Ozerwitz and, Millville decided to play this game. And you're right. I mean, Scott Martin just talked to a couple of, Michael Ford and some of those guys that are going to be in this game. Like it is the marquee game of all of New Jersey, I think, right up there maybe with Bergen Catholic and RBC. But you're talking, Michael Ford, Council, Pruitt, Jalen Matthews, all FBS guys for Toms River North. Latsier Brooks, the wide receiver for Millville, is one of the best receivers in New Jersey. I just remember last year, North kind of like came out slow out of the gate against Washington Township, and that was a dogfight to the end. You're not going to be able to do that this year. I mean, and this is kind of characteristic of North's schedule dramatically ramping up, right? Last year they started with Washington Township and Rumson, and then they kind of like steamrolled their division, and then it was the state playoffs. This year, this prepares them for every single week in that American division is going to be a battle. But yeah, I mean, you might want to leave right now to get on the Parkway going south on a Friday in the summer to get there for a 4:00 kickoff, but it will be worth the long drive. That's for sure.
I've been there the last 2 years, and I did have to get creative with finding parking spots. I will tell you that. Shout out to the Tabernacle over there, letting me park in the back and not getting towed away. But on that point of it being so early for a huge game, I remember being down there last year and talking to Tom's North head coach Dave Ozerwitz, and you start the season so early, like kind of something has to give. And he's like, we did not practice special teams like at all. We have not practiced special teams yet, like going into this game. So it's like kickoff, like you just hope everything's okay. And it was a joke, but he was serious. Like it's August 25th. You don't have a ton of time to prepare, but this year you don't get the easier way in. So, I mean, that's an awesome matchup that I think the fans that are at that game are really going to pack the stands for.
I think too with Toms River North, with Micah coming back and there's something different about Micah. Like the humbleness to what who he represents and what he does with his team. I think that they're going to be ready for it. I don't think that they're taking anybody lightly, but at the same time, he's coming in with like that professional mindset and that professional attitude towards the game. He respects the opponent, and by being respectful of the opponent is what allows him to prepare. Is like every day, every snap, every practice is important for them, and I think that program is going to be ready with him coming into his senior year.
Yeah, touching on, with Micah, I mean, like you're saying with that humbleness and that there's something about him that, it really can just take a whole program to a whole new level. And I mean, they did it last year and they're looking to do this, they're looking to duplicate it this year. And, the biggest thing with Ford that he told us was, about Millville, saying, how well-rounded of a team they are. And he knows that this is going to be a tough matchup for not just himself, but the entire team. And, he passed for 1,200 yards and 17 touchdowns. He ran for over 2,300 yards and 33 touchdowns on the ground. I mean, he's a ridiculous athlete. He's also a ridiculous kid behind the books as well, with a 4.4 GPA. The whole team with him as the leader. I mean, it's tough to duplicate an undefeated season, but if there's any team, not just in the shore, but in the state that's going to do it, it's going to be Toms River North.
They are.
My big thing too is I think like last year they entered the season as an up and coming team, but now the target's on their back. I mean, Michael Ford is the reigning Gatorade New Jersey Player of the Year. North went 14-0 last year. So like last year, RBC started the year kind of as number one, and then North like overtook them and things like that. But now there's a lot more pressure, I think, on North this year, just given the incredible season that they had last year.
And I wondered too, the mindset of you're going to go out every week and try to go 1-0. We've heard that cliche, but it's a proper mindset. The odds of them going 14-0 again are extremely slim. I think even they would understand that, if they were being completely honest. But they did that. They went 14-0. They made history. I think for them, it's just about win it. Like, go win a state title. Whether it means you have 1, 2, 3, whatever many losses. Like Rumson proved that last year. They're like 4-4, and then they're in the Group 2 final. Like you're not going to really care what your record is if you win another state title. So I think that's probably, I could see that being their rallying cry. Like, hey, let's just go out there, and it's a brutal schedule, but let's get to where we want to be in the end. So, that is a massive non-conference game. Another one on Friday night at Count Basie Field when Red Bank Catholic welcomes in Bergen Catholic. I mean, Bergen Catholic, what more do you have to say? The last time I saw them is they were hanging a 45-0 victory on arch rival Don Bosco Prep in the non-public A final, which was shocking, dominant, everything, whatever superlative or hyperbolic word you want to throw in there. It was pretty accurate, and they have a boatload of talent coming back, and RBC is going to, test itself in a big way, in the biggest way, really, on Friday night. RBC returns, a bunch of dudes, as you could say. Davin Bruton, their star senior linebacker who's committed to Pitt. Emmanuel Ross, their star wide receiver, is committed to Stanford. Frankie Williams, their up-and-coming junior quarterback. A bunch of top linemen, Lorenzo Porteller, Tyler Burnham, Logan Graham on the defensive line. So it's not like RBC doesn't have top players, but this is going to be a massive challenge for them. Something they've been familiar with in the past when Stump, when they had the best teams in the shore, but were playing those non-public A teams. So a big one on Friday night, really for RBC, just to kind of, see where they stand. Win would be incredible, but that's more see where you stand against the best team in the state.
A talk statement game. That's what that is. I mean, if obviously we want them to win that one. If they drop to 0-1, it's not the end of the road for RBC. They're going to come back strong. But if they can come out on top, be 1-0 against Bergen Catholic, that's gonna send shockwaves through the entire state, and it's going to be
and beyond, probably
and beyond. Yeah,
the entire country.
Yeah. That's a wild game. I'm excited to see what happens there.
I just think that it shows RBC's aspirations, right? That's the level we want to get to. We're not scared to challenge ourselves by playing Bergen Catholic. And I think their feeling is they got this nice rivalry with DePaul going in the state finals, and to get themselves prepared to maybe see them again and have to, try to beat them this time after losing last year. Bergen Catholic, they scrimmaged Don Bosco, and now they're playing Bergen Catholic. So to me, that shows the level they're trying to reach. What I love about this game is the individual matchup. That you got, like you mentioned, Emmanuel Ross, one of the best wide receivers in the state, committed to Stanford. Meanwhile, Bergen Catholic has Kaj Sanders, committed to Rutgers, and Naeem Parrish, who's actually from Freehold, who's another FBS prospect. They could be going head-to-head on some routes. The biggest one is, Nair Daniels, 6'8", 350-pound offensive lineman for Bergen Catholic, committed to the reigning national champs at Jordan or Lorenzo Portella. That's a tremendous individual matchup. I think that's another reason a lot of these kids love these games. They're huge for recruiting. I mean, you want to get film against the best guy and burnish your reputation. These are absolutely the type of games that can do that for you. And I think the real question, from RBC last year in the games where they did lose, where they showed their offense struggled. They scored 17 points in the final. They were shut out by Seton Hall points for the season, so they were ended most of the time. But I think this is a big test of can you score against a team the caliber Bergen Catholic?
And that's going to be it will be a big test, even more so because they're still trying to figure out what they have at running back. I mean, that line is awesome. You have 4 returning starters led by Portell and Burnham, but you move on via graduation from one of the program's all-time greats in Sabina Portella. Torrin Harmon was an incredibly impactful running back, power and speed. Luke Wassif and Jamie Guttridge, they showed some promise last year in limited snaps. Now it's going to be on those guys to go out there and get it done against a great schedule.
And the biggest thing with RBC, like Scott was talking about a few minutes ago, is that while this may be, if RBC can pull this off somehow, and that's, that would be a huge statement when this game essentially is going to prepare RBC for their entire season and their states coming up. I mean, Bergen Catholic, they play Iona Prep from New York. They play Chaminade from Florida, Seton Hall Prep, Don Bosco Prep, DePaul, St. Joseph from Montvale, St. Peter's Prep, and Paramus Catholic. If that's not a team that you want for your Week 0 matchup with the type of schedule you'll face in states, then I don't know what else to say. I mean, RBC, they want that game as their Week 0 matchup. They want to get prepared and see what they ultimately have for a team like Bergen Catholic, because at the end of the day, you don't know who's going to win until they both take the field. But that's the aspiration, and that's the level of competitiveness that RBC right now is at.
Another non-conference matchup featuring a team that will be in the top 5 of the preseason rankings for us is Donovan Catholic, and they take on a challenging opponent as well. South Jersey Power St. Augustine will visit, and the Griffins, again, a lot of talent, a good amount of returners from a team that has been in the mix, challenging for division titles, has made some noise in the state playoffs, and again, like RBC, like Tom's North, another team in the upper echelon of the Shore who's challenging themselves right out of the gates in week 0.
Yeah, so with Donovan Catholic, it's kind of exciting to watch. They got a name coming back in Michael Thomas at receiver. Didn't have the greatest numbers, but he definitely has the tools. He's only going to be a junior this year, and I think really watch for that breakout season. I think he's really one of the few 1,000-yard receiver potentials for this season out of really anybody. I think he's got that speed and he can really dominate with his vertical.
I also really like from Donovan Catholic, he's going to be sophomore this year, Najee Calhoun, their starting running back. He carried the ball 80 plus times last year, was one of their star running backs, had over 500 yards. He scored 8 times on the ground. So, I mean, as a freshman, those are the type of numbers that are going to turn you into 1,000, 1,200, 1,500, short conference. And he showed all those attributes last year. The sky's only the limit for Najee right now. And he's going to be a big, big asset on whether or not Donovan Catholic soars all the way to the top or, has that 6-4, 7-3 season that they did last year.
I think the crucial thing for them is their quarterback play. They last year, they were a little too unbalanced against good teams. Like, it's really hard to just line up and run the ball down the throat of an RBC or a St. Augustine or a lot of these other teams on their schedule at Tom's River North. Todd Lamberson and the sophomore Zach Labarco is also pushing for time at quarterback. Those guys are going to have to give them more balance. Obviously, they have Michael Thomas, so they have a major weapon in the pass game, and Emmanuel Jurena, another sophomore playmaker. So they have the ingredients there, but I think they're going to need a little bit more out of the pass game now that Lamberson has a year of experience. If they're going to get over the hump against these really good teams, I think they're going to have to hurt them downfield with Thomas and the others just to back them off the line of scrimmage. They certainly have the potential to do it.
It's always interesting from a Shore Conference perspective. Right now we only have 3 non-public teams. We had 4 when Mater Dei was a school, and you see the competition that they're facing if you're trying to win a state title. So if you're fortunate enough to be in non-public B, you're talking about, it's RBC, it's DePaul, it's Donovan, and you throw a Holy Spirit in there. St. Joe's Hamilton certainly has had an amazing run, and they've been a factor. And then in non-public A with that juggernaut, with those teams in there, you see that if you don't have certain qualities, like, you just don't have a chance. Like you mentioned, if you're not balanced, and it works the other way. You could have a 5,000-yard passer. If you can't run the ball, those teams are going to eat you up. You need balance. You need good special teams. You need everything. And I think our teams have seen that over the years, where, like, within the Shore Conference, they've been dominant. And they get to that level, and it's like, whoa, okay, we need to really work on this, or we need these types of players. Really, first and foremost, with RBC, the Quentin Nelson years where they're ragdolling the teams in the Shore, and they play St. Joe's Montvale, and it's a different story. So, and I think our teams, we're closing the gap a little bit, but like you said, there can't be an area of weakness if you're going to compete at the state level with those teams. Back to the Shore Conference, we have the Guerreri Bowl, a non-divisional game. Wall and Manalapan. Ed Guerreri, the former head coach at Manalapan, led them to incredible heights, great success during his 13-year tenure there. He will be beginning his second year at Wall. Took over as the head coach last season. His good friend Dom Lepore is the head coach at Manalapan, so there's a lot going on there. It'll also be the night where Manalapan will do this every year. This is going to be the game where they honor Kyle Mullen, their former star, who was killed tragically in the Navy SEAL training, a couple of years ago. So they'll honor him there, have some festivities, which is always great, what Manalapan does, not only for all their alumni, but specifically for the Mullen family. And that's a big game for both teams, because Wall in that American division, you'd love to start 1-0 before you get knee deep into that schedule. And Manalapan, 3-7 last year, really played tough in a lot of games, had an awesome defense, but just couldn't score consistently, couldn't close out games. Now they're down in the Colonial Division, you can get a win here, things can really start snowballing. I think that, is the case for both teams.
Yeah, I think between these two teams, early and often, this is kind of one of those tester games for each team. Both programs, Wall last year they were 4-7, and Manalapan last year they were 3-7. So both teams are they're both trying to get on the right footing and get started off. I think there's going to be a little bit of swagger and a little bit of passion from Manalapan and the Braves, just from everything going on prior to the game and throughout. But like I said, I think it's going to be one of those testers throughout. There's talent on both ends. There's young talent in the receiving core for Wall. Their defense as well is pretty stout at times. And then you have Manalapan. And I think to start off the season, the edge goes to Manalapan just because they're at home. But I think both teams are very capable of taking each other down when it comes to, when it's all said and done.
Yeah, it was just real quick. They played last season. It was a 14-7 win for Wall. So it's, like you said, the two teams are kind of mirror images of each other, and you would expect that it's the same systems that Guerrero ran when he was there, when Dom Lepore was his defensive coordinator. So it's like looking in the mirror for those schools.
And I think this will show you the fine line of the American division, right? Manalapan was driving down to potentially beat Wall in that game last year. And Mason Adam, who's an up-and-coming star for Wall, he played in the secondary last year. He's also a really good running back. He intercepted a pass in the end zone inside the final minutes. That was the difference between Wall staying in the American division and Manalapan going down into the Colonial division. True. Like, that's how close the margin is. It's not easy to make headway if you're Wall when you have the schedule you have. So that's why I think you're right, Bob. This game, to me, I think is huge for Wall. Like, they have to have this game coming out of the gate to get some confidence and, get some momentum going into that American. Because, I mean, let's be honest, everyone is going to have them predicted to be last in the American division because every other one of those teams is going to be ranked in the top 10 to start the year. So I think for Wall, this is their chance to show, like, don't forget about us. We can compete in this division. And yeah, like you said, I think the challenge for both of them, both of their offenses need to be better than they were last year for them to take a step forward.
Yes. And you look on Manalapan, the reason for optimism coming off a 3-win season is they still made the playoffs because their schedule was so good. They lost 10-7 to Jackson in the first round of the playoffs. So they're right there with the top 10 team. The losses to the American division teams, they lost 23-0 to RBC, 35-6 to Donovan, which was the only blowout. They lost 17-14 to Middletown South, 14-10 to Rumson, and then the 14-7 to Wall. So they're right there in a lot of these games. Like they were, a score away from potentially beating two ranked teams. And then we're having a completely different conversation. So I think Manalapan is excited for that. And certainly, you're in the Colonial division, which should be very competitive, has some very good teams, but it's not the American division. And we'll see if Manalapan can benefit just from not having to run that gauntlet week in, week out.
I think a key with this game too is I really do like what Don Lepore is doing over at Manalapan. I think that I think his system a lot of the kids feed into, and with it being such a balanced matchup, it's going to take really who comes out fast, who comes out aggressive, but it's really going to be over the length of the game is that field position battle, that back and forth, getting the good field position, driving up, punting it, getting almost like working it through your defense. And so it's going to take like the right coaching moments of, all right, this is the time that we need to try something a little bit different, maybe going for it on a 4th and 2, a 4th and 3. And that might be the deciding factor in the game is picking the right moment to do it. Don't be over aggressive, but just finding that time.
The teams we've mentioned so far, we've mentioned elite linemen for all of them. These two teams, Wall and Manalapan, they're under the radar linemen in terms of when you're talking about the high FBS recruits, but Evan Radosevich is a 3-year starter. He's committed to the admissions process at Princeton from Manalapan, continuing their tradition of Ivy League linemen. And Wall has a pair, big 6'5", over 300-pound senior Chris Rogers, and then senior Benny Sasso, who has an offer from Wagner and some more FCS interest, the younger brother of our former defensive player of the year, Charlie Sasso. So some heft up front for both of those teams. And that could lead to another one of those low-scoring games like we talked about with Middletown South and Rumson. If this is 14-7, just like it was last season, I don't think anyone would be surprised.
And don't forget the Manalapan special teams. Every
Yes.
year, right out of the gate, they have a couple guys taking kicks and punts to the house, and
Yes.
and they always have a pretty good kicker. So, like Scott said, if this game comes down to a really tight thing, a kick return, a punt, pinning somebody could be the difference.
Absolutely. Two teams in past years have developed, I wouldn't say have developed a rivalry, but have played each other. During the COVID year, they ended up meeting on Thanksgiving, or excuse me, during 2021 season, they ended up meeting on Thanksgiving. Last year, they played a consolation game against each other. Now they're division opponents, and they're two of the story programs in the conference, and that's Manasquan and Shore Regional. Now in the Constitution division, and those two teams will meet opening weekend. Manasquan, they lost their two really offensive leaders in quarterback Brett Patton and Jameer Howard to graduation. Shore, lost their leading rusher, Liam Rosa, but brings back a lot. This is a really interesting game because I think there's certainly proud tradition with both. Manasquan having the most sectional titles in Shore Conference history with 11. Shore Regional tied for third, with a bunch of schools at 7. What's going to happen here? Is Shore going to show, hey, we can compete in this division with some bigger schools? Is Manasquan going to show you that, hey, we have the goods to kind of bounce back and have that kind of season? I think it's a very intriguing matchup to start the year.
Yeah, and I think it's between two teams that have a lot of question marks just because of new guys offensively. Like you mentioned, this is going to be a Manasquan offense that has to replace almost all of its major production from the last couple of years. Shore Regional's also dealt with some injuries to some key guys in the preseason. I think a big thing is, for sure, like you said, it's funny. You talk to the players and they're like, bring it on. We want the challenge of playing these bigger schools. You talk to Coach Mark Costantino and he's like not happy about it at all to some degree of like these schedule makers didn't do us any favors. We're a Group 1 team playing all these, other than Asbury, every other team in the division is bigger than them. But I mean, Shore is always physical up front. They run the wing tee, which is not an easy offense to defend, especially when you're a team that doesn't see it a whole lot. Most of these other schools don't see other teams running the wing tee. But you're right. I think this is really just a question right out of the gate. Will Shore Regional be right there in this new divisional alignment to make a run at this division title, or will Manasquan kind of assert that they're still a little bit of a cut above them?
What I'm really curious to see with Shore against Manasquan is how Shore's running game plays against Manasquan's defense. I mean, Alex George coming back with Lucas White, both can break out in very special ways for sure. And, just seeing how Manasquan's defense is going to line up against them, it's really going to be a telltale sign of how the season, kind of plays out for both teams, in my opinion. Like you said, Shore going up against teams that aren't in Group 1 off the rip. And then you have a program, Manasquan, that's had quite the success over the course of 20, 30 years. So it's going to be, a prove-it situation for Manasquan, saying that they're still right here in the program, but it's also going to be a prove-it situation for Shore going up against someone that they're not too familiar with right out of the gate.
This is division, not to get too deep into division discussion, because we're going to do that on our first Varsity Link Coaches Corner coming up next week, but this is an interesting division because you have Shore and Asbury as Group 1 schools. You have some bigger schools, but you have an Ocean team who has a lot of question marks, graduated, an FBS quarterback. You have an extremely young St. John Vianney team. You have a Homedale team coming off a 1-win season that aims to bounce back, but still has to do it on the field. So, we might look back at the end of the season and go, wow, that week 0 game was for the division title. I imagine it's hard to go in as a team thinking that, but that could end up being the case. Elsewhere, and we're going to go to the Colonial Division now, similar to the Shore Manasquan matchup. Colts Neck, Point Borough. This is a good one. I mean, Point Borough really makes the leap up, multiple divisions with the success they've had, winning the sectional title 2 years ago, going 9-1 last season. And now they're up in a division with a whole bunch of Group 4 schools, them Raritan and 4 Group 4 schools. Point Borough, loaded with what they bring back offensively, notably their quarterback, Matt Oliphant, and their A-back, Jay Croce. And Colts Neck brings back one of the best running backs in Shore and Chris Scully. They're big up front. They play physical defense. That's a real interesting matchup for Colts Neck. how do they fare against this triple option that was second only to Toms River North's nuclear offense in terms of points per game last season? And then for Point Borough, hey, you're facing a bigger school. How does this all translate, to that, and kind of a preview of what those two teams' seasons can look like? And that will, thankfully, I'll be at that game because that'll be on Saturday night over at Al Senior Field, and that's going to be a raucous environment. I'm sure the bonfire will be going, and there'll be 8 million kids in the crowd.
I think that's going to be a fun game. And when it really comes down to it, I think there is an X factor in that game, and you already said his name, Jake Croce. He's been nothing but consistent over the last 2 years. Things that end up happening in some of these games are these kids get padded stats when they play lesser teams, and that makes their end of season stats look really good. If you go week by week with Jake Croce, it's just nothing but consistent. The kid has speed, power. He's got everything, and now coming into his senior year, getting a little bit bigger again and a little bit faster again. I think he kind of really breaks out as potentially the top running back in the entire Shore, in my opinion. And I don't think they're gonna be able to stop him.
I mean, I love this game. This is like the stealth, one of the best games of the weekend, because don't forget, this is 2 division champs from last year going against each other now that because of the realignment. And like Scott mentioned, Point Borough has some firepower offensively with Croce and Oliphant. And I guess the question is, who will be that other slot back, to replace some production in the triple option? But when you have 2 guys that are that talented, you can't key on one of them specifically. And I think the other big thing is Colts Neck, again, as a bigger school, you don't see the triple option that much. It's more run at the small school level. So that's not easy to prepare for, although, again, since it's your first game, you've had the whole offseason to prepare rather than 1 week or something like that. But I think it's the real question of can the power up front of a Group 2 team stand up to the power of a much bigger school, bigger line across, and a team that, under Coach Matt Ahern, they are all about being physical. They are not subtle about what they do. They line up and Scully comes downhill at you like 25 times a game. So, is Colts not going to be able to lean on them? This is just such an interesting game because it's 2 really strong running attacks, different types. Whose will get, imposed? Who will be able to drain the clock and sit on the ball longer? Because don't forget, neither of these teams are that great playing from behind either. So I think, the team that gets out to the early lead or can get to a 2 touchdown lead, that could swing the whole game too.
I agree. And with Point Borough, a couple of things with Point Borough. First of all, in the matchup just of size up front, I think what helps them is their offense. Being that it's a flex bone, you got to block the guy in front of you, certainly, but it's more about misdirection and it's a zone blocking scheme. And it's not about I'm just bigger and stronger than you. So I think that helps them there. They also have, in my opinion, one of the more underrated players in the Shore, and Charles Boom Davison. Come on, with a nickname like that, you got to love him. He's a 3-year starter on both sides of the ball. He'll be the leader of that line. And one thing head coach Brian Staub was really excited about is, this is the first time they had both their quarterback and running back both returning the same season since 2017 when they were in a sectional final. And usually their quarterback in the second season takes like a major leap. And that the proof is there with the teams that, that he's been a part of, either as an offensive coordinator or as the head coach at Point Borough. So if that's the case, Oliphant, who has tremendous game-breaking ability, he's not an option quarterback that you're just going to take the 5-6 yards as kind of the decoy, the third option. If he gets a lane, he's gone. His ideal day is 10 carries, 140 yards, and 2 TDs. So Colts Neck's going to have to worry about that big play. They want to drain the clock, Point Borough, and they'll gladly take those 19-play drives, but they can also hit home runs there. Moving down the line, we'll go to a couple more non-conference games now that stood out, and then we'll run down the rest of the schedule. Long Branch, Piscataway, traditional power under their head coach Dan Higgins for the longest of times. Always in the mix, always expecting them to see them at Rutgers or wherever the championship games were being played. And Long Branch, again, quietly last season, had a really, really good year, was in the mix, in the playoffs. They returned one of the better quarterbacks in the Shore in Ernest Reevy. They always have talent up and down the lineup. I think that's a big game for Long Branch, again, to just kind of see where they are against a traditional power in New Jersey.
And I feel like they come into this season with some momentum too, right? They shocked, Penn Saucon in the playoffs last year Their defense shut down like a really prolific offensive team. And then they beat Red Bank Regional, if I remember correctly, on Thanksgiving, which was another nice win for them. So I think the question with Long Branch is always, they're good when they're good up front. When their linemen are experienced veterans, they usually rush for 2,000 yards plus as a team. So I know they did lose some there in that area in graduation. So, how will the new guys fare there? They usually also have one of the better tailbacks in the area. Who's going to pick up some of that production this year? Their defense last year was tremendous. So I think if they can get more offensive consistency against quality opponents, they're a team that could really put a scare into some big teams, because they got a really hard schedule themselves this year, Long Branch, especially outside their division.
And you mentioned the momentum real quick before I let you guys jump in, John and Scott. They lost to Middletown South to open the season. They beat Lacey. They were shocked by Southern, where they were shut out. And then they had Toms over North the next week. And all of a sudden you're 1-3, but then they won 4 straight games. They won 6 of their last 7 games. The only loss in there was to Mainland, who was the sectional champ, beat Middletown South, in the championship game. So you're right. It's a new season, but if they can take any of that momentum into this year, which is the goal for every team, they're going to be in good shape.
And another thing that I'm curious to see how it plays out is how Reeve, deals with the pressure of having to figure out new players in his senior season, but also graduating, 4 receivers and 2 of his top tailbacks as well. So there's going to be a lot of plug and play going on early and seeing what options are going to be best and what options are going to be viable for Reeve and for the entire offense. But another name that I really do look out for, from the wideouts is Saheem Brown, their senior wideout. Got some playing time last year, scored throughout. So he can be Reeve's real target throughout the year to shine and, produce all throughout for the Green Wave. And like I just said, I think Reeve finding his groove with his entire team and a lot of them being new starters, I think it's going to be a real determination on how the season plays out for Long Branch.
Yeah, and with Long Branch, you mentioned some of the players they lost to graduation. Shamar Williams, 2-time first-team all-shore selection. Mike Hall, Sekou Kamau. I mean, those are some big-time players that were all-shore level, either all-shore or all-shore caliber type of players. So it's the same for every team. You got to replace some key guys every year. We'll see how Long Branch does that. Usually not hurting for skill players. Not that they can just plug and play, but, that will be interesting to see which guys step up around Reeve to give them the kind of offense that they expect they can have. The last specific non-conference game I want to talk about be on Sunday, last game of week 0 for the shore teams at least, will be Manasquan down in Ocean City at the Battle of the Beach, taking on Cedar Creek. Cedar Creek, 2 years removed from a 13-0 season. And then last year dipped down a little bit to 4-7, but it's a talented program. They're probably going to be pretty good, I would imagine, not knowing a ton about them. And then with Manasquan, you saw them start to claw back last season to kind of be the program that they were, where Stump, as you wrote in your season primer, you just pencil them in the top 10 every year. That wasn't the case for a little bit, but they came back in a big way last year with some, big time players. Wellman Crooms, their outstanding wide receiver, Amir Martinez at quarterback, Colin Palumbo in the backfield, a huge, and heavily recruited lineman with Jaden Elijah. So they have the pieces in place. They have a coach in Jay Graber who won a championship when he was at Allentown. So the pieces are there. This is one of those games where, okay, Manasquan, let's see what you have now in this year following your division championship.
Yeah, I thought they, last year they were a young up and coming team, and they were kind of the team that beat the teams they were supposed to beat and came up short against the real quality teams on their schedule. They did have a nice playoff game where they tested Hopewell pretty good. Mm-hmm. This is the Manasquan of old in the sense of just talent at all the skill positions, big linemen. Obviously their struggle for years was their players were getting cherry picked by all the non-public schools and other schools. Like Manasquan was still producing talent. They just weren't actually playing for Manasquan. So now that they've been able to keep a lot of those guys home, their offense is experienced in quarterback. Martinez is back. Palumbo is a 1,000-yard rusher who's back. So they have weapons in the passing game. Elijah's a huge lineman who's very agile. I saw him in the basketball court this year. He moves really well for his size, very athletic. So patience, they didn't really have them last year. They were the young team coming on. how are they going to deal with it now if they are a preseason top 10 and then teams are coming after them?
Yeah, and I mean they have, like you were just saying, they have so much talent that's young as well, and they were able to mesh whether they were freshmen or sophomores or juniors last year. I mean, Wellman Cruz, one of the most talented receivers in the short conference, was a freshman last year. Colin Palumbo rushed for almost 1,100 yards, and he's going to be a junior this year. And also Amir Martinez is going to be a junior. So, and this is a team that, like you said, they gave Hopewell Valley a pretty good test in the state playoffs, and they bumped up in divisions. And Mattawan for about 8-9 years now has had a really, really dull period of time where they haven't been able to find their groove. I mean, back to the LC Pearson days was the last time that they really were, good within the short conference. So, I mean, with the team that they have set up this year, I think there's a lot of expectations for Mattawan all throughout, the town. But I mean, like you just said, Cedar Creek's coming off a 13-0 season 2 years ago. So it's going to be a really big test for a week 0 matchup for Mattawan.
Mattawan they don't start their division schedule till their third game. So where you want to win your division title, and I think you could probably peg them as the favorite in that division just because of what they did last year and what they bring back. But you start off with Cedar Creek, and then you have a non-divisional game against Rumson right after that. So regardless of what your record is, you're going to have a pretty good idea of where you stand, what you need to work on, and your division slate is still clean. So I think in terms of competing for another division championship, that helps. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Mattawan, 1-1, 0-2, even whatever their record is. After 2 games, all of a sudden you look up and they've rattled off 5-6 straight wins, and they're either in the top 10 or knocking on the door. So that's one of those teams, big potential this season. Let's see what they can do and if they can fulfill that and get back to where we're used to seeing them, from at least from Stumpy and I's days.
I'm just happy that the rivalry with Rumson is renewed. I mean, 2010, 2011. I mean,
Yep.
Those were some epic games between Rumson and Mattawan in the state finals. Rumson shocked them when Mattawan was undefeated, competing for number 1 on the shore. The next year, Rumson was the heavy favorite. Mattawan came back and shut them out in a 3-0 game in the state finals. Like, I think that's one of the more underrated rivalries out there. I'm so happy that Mattawan versus Rumson is back on the schedule.
And John, you know this as an alum, like you got to be able to go back there. The flame grilled burgers, man, you can't beat them on a Friday, Saturday night in Mattawan.
Always. Best grill for Friday Night Lights.
It is. Hey, listen, that's a different podcast for another time where we run down all the top foods. I'm not even kidding. That will be a podcast where we reminisce on our old snack bar favorites. So running down the rest of the schedule, and like I said, it's a robust one. 17 games, on Friday night, total of 20 for the weekend. Non-divisional games, you have Middletown North visiting Freehold Township, Toms River East at Brick, Monmouth Regional at Barnegat. And then we'll go to some more non-conference games. Absegami at Lacey, West Windsor Plainsboro United, which is the South and North high schools combined into one football team there, at Southern. Allentown at Brick Morrow. That's probably a game we should expand on. North Plainfield at Manchester. Hamilton West at Central. New Egypt at Point Beach. St. John Vianney will play Hamilton, also down at the Battle of the Beach Showcase. And then Manville at Keyport on Saturday on Jackson Street. So that Brick Morrow game does stand out a little bit. Allentown hasn't been at the level they were at since Graber left, but has still been a quality team. And Brick Memorial, it's the senior year of their quarterback, Connor Dietz, who has rewritten that record book. They have a bunch of other standouts returning: Kevin Andrews, Trey Talmadge, Nico Marabou. Can they break through and make a run at a division title and a playoff berth? This is a non-conference game, but this is still, I think, important for the Mustangs to start off 1-0.
And it's important for their defense to just get some confidence right out of the gate. I mean, we know their games. You definitely didn't get cheated if you went to a Brick Memorial game last year. They needed extra bulbs for the scoreboard. Every game was like 45-40 or something. I mean, when you have Dietz, you can get in those crazy games. But I know they'd prefer to be much more balanced team this year after going 6-5. Talmadge, I think, is a guy you mentioned that played as a freshman last year, back as a sophomore. He could be a real playmaker on that side of the ball. But yeah, I mean, we know what Dietz is all about. We know they're going to score. So the real question you want to learn from that game is, how much has the defense improved since last year?
Yeah, because there were some games last year where he had incredible numbers, And Brickmore either still lost the game or had to pull it out at the end. So again, like we talked about with a bunch of the previous teams, balance. You have to have that balance to compete. You can have an incredible defense, and if your offense can't score, you're not going to win a ton of games. And you can have an incredible offense, and the same thing. Where defense can't stop anybody. You're relying on winning shootouts every week. So interesting to see. You're right. What the Mustangs bring defensively, right there in week 0.
More, I am excited. I know you guys mentioned Connor Dietz. I think, obviously you're saying he's rewriting the record books there. He's probably one of the best talents coming out of the Brick Memorial football program in a long time. And coming into his senior year, there's always that difference when you've already been successful and now you have your senior year ahead of you, knowing it's the end of your high school career, regardless of wherever you go. So he's going to want to come out of the gate and he's going to want to do a lot. So the question mark that I have on Connor is going to be, is he going to force situations because he wants to start out hot and keep everything going? Or is he going to settle in and be the leader that everybody knows he can be? So that's definitely something to look for in game 1.
The Middletown North Freehold Township game too. It's a non-divisional game, but that's a little bit intriguing. Middletown North does bring back their quarterback and one of their top receivers, and Steve Bush, one of the best coaches in the Shore. If you talk to he's like a coach's coach. Like you talk to the other coaches, and universally they always have praise for Steve Bush. They're always in the mix. And then Freehold Township has unfortunately lost some really talented players to transfer. Chase Enlow, their running back, Sean Corchado left. So that's tough when you have the players in your program. All of a sudden they're not there the next year. Look, every player family's going to make their own decisions, but in terms of what Freehold Township has to deal with, we'll see what they have in the fold. They're a pass heavy team. Usually, they're going to try to be as balanced as they can, but they run that air raid under Corey Davis. And they're going to throw it a lot. So the team that comes out of there with a victory, I think will not open eyes, but you go, okay, let's see what you got.
And that's 2 teams that love to throw the ball. I mean, if you like passing offense, that's definitely the game you want to check out.
Game.
You have Corey Davis. Well, especially like you said, Chase Enlow was the real running threat. Obviously, he was a receiving threat out of the backfield, but he could really hurt you running the ball and draws and everything else out of that offense. So to lose him is tough. But they return a decent amount of experience. I saw them last year against Jackson. They showed flashes. I think the big thing with Township is putting together 4 good quarters against good teams. And especially defensively, against Middletown North only averaged 14 points a game last year. So this is a game for them to come out and start to turn things around with guys who have another year under their belts. And we know the talent they lost up front defensively. I think they're going to need to score a little bit more this year just because it's not going to be easy replacing some of the all-shore stars that they graduated on defense.
The excitement is in the air, certainly. But at the same time, it's so early. I feel like last season we look back in October and we're like, week 0 felt like it was last year. And even for a lot of the teams, like there's some huge matchups, but how many will be extremely consequential? There might be a couple that you look back and say, hey, those decided those division titles or kind of sent the team on their way. But at the same time, like it's still so early. So whether you win or lose, I think a lot of these teams are going to be like, this is great, or hey, whatever, shake it off and let's get back to work. But in any event, it's the biggest week 0 we've ever had with this many, 27 teams playing in 20 games. So let's start that petition to the NJSIA to just rename it week 1 next year. I think we should.
Yeah, I think the other thing though is, I just wonder how many teams are going to be way better in 3 or 4 weeks that took a loss this week. And in the top 10, they're going to say, oh, we're better than that team. We're better than, that week 0 loss. That was a fluke. I mean, that was practically a scrimmage, but you're like, no, it counts. It's going to be part of the results. So, it's like, you can't really come out slow out of the gate because you're right. I mean, these are certain games you may look back and be like, that was a crucial game where like, you know what? You could never make it above this ranking because you lost that game that first week. So we'll see how it all turns out.
You almost wonder if teams will maybe start pining for like, sure, we'll play week 0, but like let it be a non-divisional game or a non-conference game, or at least we're not jumping into one of these, crucial division games right off the bat. Middletown South Rumson, sticks out in mind with that, but the Colts Neck Point Borough game and Manasquan Shore could certainly fall into that category. Well, that's it for the slate of week 0 games. I shouldn't say that's it. I mean, we've been talking about these for a while, but an exciting slate of matchups. I will be at the Rumson Middletown South game Friday night, and I'll be at Colts Neck Point Bar on Saturday night. So look for updates from there, game stories, photos, video highlights, the whole 9 yards. And, we'll be flying around, to multiple schools throughout the week. So be sure to head to shoresportsnetwork.com. We'll have our picks of the week coming up, so you can all make fun of us and use us as bulletin board material for picking against your teams. I do try to make sure we don't ever have the clean sweep. We don't get memed, but hey, look, sometimes it happens, man. If it can happen on college game day, it can happen to us too. So we'll have that. Our football scoreboard will be up all weekend, so you can make sure to check back there often as we have the scores and the recaps from all the games. And then, starting the following week, we're hitting the ground running with all our usual football features, back with the podcast each and every week and plenty more. So be sure to head to shoresportsnetwork.com to check out all that. Thank you again to our sponsors, Varsity Link, Jersey Mike's, Thrive, and Ironhouse Performance. We do have some additional Instagram accounts that we've kind of spread out. Scott, you can kind of tell us more about that.
Yeah, so we really kind of dove in with doing some more on the social media aspect, and Instagram is really starting to take off. So because we're covering more sports, including girls sports, we've got girls volleyball really heating up. We decided, and that's actually it is live on there now, but this is the first time it's being announced. There's only a couple followers, but we have a Shore Sports _football handle. So we have our main account, follow our main Shore Sports Network account, but then we're going to have our Shore Sports football account that will be only for football. We'll still have football on the main one as well, but it's going to allow us to not drown out some of the other sports that are just as important to get that coverage out there. So just keep an eye out for that on Instagram, and follow us on all the different networks, with this podcast being on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, any podcast player that you can think of, it'll be on there. And then and just follow along. Generally speaking, I was talking with Bob yesterday. As he said, he does some of the live coverage at games, so that's going to be more of your Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. And then Instagram is going to be some more of the curated after the fact videos, so more of the highlight aspect. So make sure there's different platforms for different things. And then overall, just know you can go to shoresportsnetwork.com. We've got the live Twitter feed embedded directly into the scoreboard, which is going to be great on a Friday night when you want to see what's going on around the shore.
Certainly. And it's an exciting time of year. This will be, I'm coming up on 20 years covering Shore Conference football, which is insane sound. Stump, you got me beat by a few there, even though you had a little bit of a hiatus mixed in there. So it's an exciting time of year. Look, there's not much, it's a pretty good job getting out on a Friday and Saturday night, watching some high school football, and in our area, watching some of the best teams in the state and some of the, highly recruited players in the country. It's going to be fun. And we're excited for everyone joining us for the ride. As Scott said, Shore Sports Network podcast, like and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Music, Stitcher, and on down the line. We'll be back each and every week. Also, don't forget,
quick, we got a special guest.
Look at that.
We've got Rob Davis on the line. He called before, and I was like, all right, I'm calling him back. Rob, you're on the podcast right now. I've got Scott Stump here, Bob Batters here, John Carelli. Let's chop it up for a sec.
What's up, guys?
Coach
What's up,
Davis,
Rob?
former Barnegat head coach, now first-year head coach at Egg Harbor Township. Started the Shore Football Report during his brief coaching interlude. Rob, good to talk to you.
I miss you guys.
We miss you too, man. How's everything going down in Atlantic County?
I really miss you guys.
Good stuff.
How many transfers have you tried to get into Egg Harbor Township in the last 3 weeks?
Nobody wants to play for me.
Nobody wants to play for him.
It's
Hey,
probably
you
the
said-
Hawaiian shirts. Please tell me you didn't wear the Hawaiian shirts to practice or anything. You've been wearing EHT gear.
Actually, to be honest with you, I've been wearing a short football shirt. I haven't worn the white shirt once.
You need the Hawaiian shirts. That's your look.
You don't like the Bill Belichick look one.
Yeah, the one that was showing off the guns with that one. Yeah, I didn't really have the courage to wear that one last year.
The sweatshirt with the cut off sleeves.
Yes.
A bold move.
Yes, the one with the cut off sleeves. I've been wearing it every day to practice. I said, that's consistency. They go, no, that's disgusting. But you guys, I'm looking forward to you guys covering the Shore football this year, man. It's going to be an exciting time with you guys.
How's our way? And we're excited to partner with the Shore Football Report with Stump over here, helping us out talking football every week and just expanding our coverage. I think we all have that in common where we love Shore Conference sports and in this specific instance, Shore Conference football. So always great to come together with like-minded individuals and promote this sport in the Shore.
You guys covered me when I was at Bargen our first year, man, and yes. It was, what a buzz you guys created in the Shore Conference, and it's exciting when you guys are together doing it. I mean, that's potent. So everybody's excited about you guys covering the football season. Everybody's excited about their season. Plus, you guys joining forces is a good thing for Shore Conference football.
Thank you, Rob.
You guys create great memories for those players and the families and the programs and that's what it's all about. It really is, though. But yeah, my dad has the clippings of all you guys and watching you guys grow and to where you are right now, man. It's awesome. It really is. So I'm excited about your podcast every week.
Well, likewise,
everybody. That's Coach Rob Davis. He's down at Egg Harbor Township. Shore Football Report, like you said, we're partnering with him and Scott Stump, so there'll be a weekly segment and just overall making sure to get as much coverage as possible.
They might have to be like our adopted 43rd team, like every week. Like, here's the EHT report. I'll just check in on them real quick, maybe rib Rob a little bit, and get back to our Shore Conference talk. We'll make sure we at least devote 30 seconds to what Egg Harbor did the week before. So, on that note, like, subscribe, download the Shore Sports Network podcast. Wherever you get your podcast. We'll be back each and every week for the rest of the football season, talking football specific, and there'll be many more episodes covering various sports on the Shore Sports Network podcast. So for Scott Stump, Scott Martin, John Carelli, I'm Bob Batters. Thanks again for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.